Good day, good people. You're listening to Lifting the Veil. This is Carrie Lee, and today in the third episode of Season 3, we are joined by unschooler, homeschooler, mother, author, speaker, Dayna Martin. Dayna, it's so good to have you on the show finally. We've been in contact for over a year now, and it's really good to have you here. Thanks for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me. It's finally wonderful to connect with you, so I'm looking forward to this interview.
I have been too for so long now. Now, as I said, you're an unschooler. And at first, when I began homeschooling, I had my daughter, I was homeschooling, and then my son was still in school. And then I ended up bringing him out of school as well. For me, I still had them on this regiment. I still felt as if I had to have them, doing everything, all the curriculum. And then somebody who introduced me to you, she had said to me, you don't have to do that. This isn't what it's all about. And she really knocked me out of my paradigm because I went so far as to argue with her. No, the kids need structure and they need this and they need that. Now, I have to ask you, where did you get the inspiration to do this with your family? Was it something from your childhood, or is it something that you just came to and said, this is what I want to do?
There's so many different layers to how I came to this life. For one, I never would have guessed that I'd be parenting this way. It wasn't something that I planned. It just happened really naturally and organically. I'd say that it started when I was pregnant with my first child. Let me first share that I have 4 kids, 2 boys and 2 girls. I have a 5-year-old son, Orion, an 8-year-old daughter, Ivy. Tiffany is 12. Tiffany's real name is Dakota, but she told me at 3 years old that wasn't her name and that she felt like she was a Tiffany. So we've been calling her Tiffany ever since.
It's amazing.
Devin is 14 and a half. And so when I was pregnant with him, I started researching natural birth, and I had an amazing birth with him. I never thought I could birth a child naturally, but when I did, it really transformed me. I was always like a really shy, insecure person, and going through that process empowered me so much that I wanted to help other women experience it. But something really pivotal that happened to me is right after I gave birth to him, and he was born at the hospital, my only child born at the hospital. I gave birth to him and I was holding him, and the nurses came in and turned the TV on, and the Columbine shootings were happening live. He was born on Columbine. And it was so emotional to be literally watching mothers losing their children as I'm holding my newborn, all the hormones and everything associated with birth. I just was sobbing. I couldn't believe it. And it was the first time I ever considered not sending my children to school. And it wasn't because I was petrified they were going to get shot. It was, of course, parents fear that and think about that. But what it was is, as I was watching these kids jump out of the windows to try to save themselves. I was thinking to myself, how many of those kids would have rather have stayed home that morning? And how many of those mothers would have rather spent time with their kids that day instead of having to send them to school? So the idea of free choice and children's rights was born with me on the day my son was born, which happened to be the day of the Columbine shooting. So that's one tiny little part of what got me started on this.
That's an amazing story, though, because I can remember something similar, sitting on 9/11 with Sierra in my arms, and she was only months old, and that changed so much for me. So it really does take something traumatic to wake you up to, I think, what you truly want for yourself and for your children in this life.
Right, and it makes you think about what's important. I started to think about family more in a way that I hadn't thought about before. I thought about the fact that when you have a child in school, schools force you to put their needs and their agenda before family. I mean, you have to ask permission from the institution to be with your children. And that's not true freedom. And people are really led to believe that they are free, but they're not. So one thing I love to do is share the different ways that you can reach higher and higher levels of freedom. The other thing that got me on this path was we practiced attachment parenting with our kids, which I didn't even know how to label, to be honest with you, until Devin was over a year old. But I held him when he wanted to be held. I fed him, nursed him when he wanted to eat. And when he wanted to be with us at night, I slept next to him. So I just embraced honoring what his needs were. And I always trusted him and listened to him. And that's the basis of unschooling. And I can go into more depth with that as we go along.
It's really funny that you say that. I can remember when as a new mother, I can remember everybody saying, well, you have to schedule your child. And I remember looking at them thinking, that is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard. I don't tell them when they're hungry. They tell me when they're hungry. They tell me when they want. You listen to their needs. It's not about making your needs met. It's about meeting their needs. I did the same thing. I had no problem sleeping with my child. I mean, to be honest, every so once in a while, Aiden at 8, he comes in and cuddles in between John and I. I have no problem with that. I can't imagine anybody that would have a problem with that. But that seems to be a big deal. There seems to be some kind of line where parents are so afraid to have that physical contact with their children because it's become some kind of, I don't know, dirty word or something to that effect. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think so many parents would love to be closer physically with their children and would love to meet their needs, but there's so much fear in our culture and so much pressure by doctors, by our parents, by friends, by our culture in general, saying not to do that you'll spoil children if you meet their needs, and they'll manipulate you. So there's this whole underlying idea that children are manipulative, and it's really detrimental to not see children in that way. I mean, I like to believe that children were born good, where I think our culture is so steeped in religion, and there's so much dogma there about children being born bad, and they need to be trained to be good. So it really is a whole different philosophical perspective of children in general and their rights. So we've always co-slept with our kids. I never used a crib. The cats used it, and then I sold it on eBay. This gorgeous, $400 crib that my father got me for Devin. I thought it was the most beautiful thing ever, and never used it once. And I actually wrote in the eBay description, I remember writing, "I don't recommend putting your baby in this, but I need to sell it." We co-slept, and I had so many bids on it, but even telling people not to buy it. So.
Yeah, but that's great, though. I remember I wanted this ridiculous bassinet, and do you know my children never slept in it? They were always beside me.
Oh,
or in between us, but never in the bassinet.
It's so funny. Like every time I see a new mom, I'm a childbirth teacher and a doula, so I work a lot with new moms and first-time moms, and they're always so excited about their baby shower and all the things they're going to get. And I so remember being in that place. But one thing I say is, all you need is a sling or a baby carrier, because that's all your baby's going to want. Even though you want all these things, your baby just wants you.
Yeah, it's just so unnecessary to have all these gizmo and gadgets. Have you ever read the book, The Ringing Cedars?
Yeah, I've read the Ringing Cedars series, yeah.
Okay, so something that really hit me while I was reading that was the idea that, hey, wait a minute, we didn't have all these gadgets for children at one point. The only thing that they had was nature. Right. That's what raised them up. It was, the butterfly coming and flying by them, and the bees and the different creatures. It had nothing to do with, well, you have to have black and white this, and you have to have a mobile so that they can have something to gaze at. It's ridiculous. It's pre-training for the conditioning that comes in the future, I would almost say.
Yeah, and all these items that are sold for new parents are all a replacement for the parent. Every single one of them is a replacement for some kind of human contact or a basic need that a parent could meet in their own arms. So they're really unnecessary, and it's so sad because it really is a business. I mean, people are making millions and millions of dollars off selling these baby soothing products, these teddy bears with heartbeats, and all these crazy things when all you need is yourself. And that's sleeping close to your baby, feed them when they want to eat, and life is much easier when you have that mindset of just trusting your children and listening to them.
Well, it's become the idea that parents, you can see it perpetuated in the media, that they feel as if parenthood is now some kind of trivial time thief. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, we don't have time to do this, and we don't have time to do that, and it's taking away from. And I have to question, why do people have children in the first place? Do you have children to let to send them off to the state, or do you have them to raise them yourself? And that was something that I had a really big problem with. I originally didn't want to send my kids to school, but I allowed myself to be bullied by family who said that that's the way it had to be, and I was going to deny them all of these wonderful opportunities. Now, how did you deal with that coming at you? Did you have people saying things like that to you? Like, what about the social aspect? And what do you do for this? And don't you think about the opportunities they're missed? What was your response to those kind of things?
Oh, I still get those kind of comments, especially with interviews and so forth. People are so curious, but I think the more confident you get, the less it bothers you, and the more open you become and less defensive in your response. Byron Katie said that defense is the first act of war. So I always keep that in my mind, that I never have to defend my life. So it depends on who's asking. If it's the cashier at the grocery store, I answer really simply and whimsically and change the subject. It depends. My mother-in-law, my in-laws live right behind us, and they've always been challenged with our choices. But it's been such a journey over the years. At first, I would send them articles. I remember when Devin was a baby, they were against us, extended breastfeeding and co-sleeping. So I would send articles about co-sleeping and so forth, just so they could understand why I was doing what I was doing. Especially growing up a woman, we're so conditioned to be people pleasers. And growing up in the institution, we're basically only allowed to approve of ourselves when others approve of us. So if we got good grades or obeyed and did what we were told, we're lovable. So I really wanted that love from my mother-in-law. It was very, very hard to be rejected by her and choosing. Well, I can't say it was hard, but it hurt to have to choose to listen to my instinct and Devin over the love from her, for example. But in time, I learned that self-love and that love that comes from my child from listening to him was much, much greater. But my in-laws have never been very supportive, but I've learned to just focus on what we have in common. I think when you're doing something that somebody disagrees with, you can still have a relationship with them, but you just talk about what you have in common instead of your differences.
I agree, and I can relate to that as well. You have people that say things like, one of the things that I've said as far as the socialization goes, and it's something that a hairdresser friend of mine, Sarai, who also homeschools, had said, well, who socializes you in the beginning anyway? It's your parents. It's your family. Your family gives you that social structure. The way that you commune with each other is how you all interact. That's how they get their social graces. Do you have a hard time finding things for the kids to do with other kids?
Oh, no. I mean, the whole socialization thing is the most common question, but the most ridiculous to me. I swear, when we were on the Dr. Phil show, it was the first thing Dr. Phil asked about, and it was so ridiculous. People just still they're not listening to the answer that we give over and over and over again as homeschoolers, that, for one, kids in school are not, quote unquote, socialized. They're age segregated. It's not a natural setup to be sitting with and hanging out with all people your same age. The only common thing that you have is your age, and that's very, very unnatural. A much more natural way to live is with all different ages, all different generations, all being immersed together, and your friends are based on your common interests, not because they're sitting next to you and they happen to both be 7. I mean, so the whole socialization in school, kids are kept away from the real world. When we get that question as an unschooling family, how are your kids going to function in the real world? I like to say it's your children that are in a brick building all day, every day, away from the real world for 12 years. Our kids are out in the real world doing things, connecting, socializing. I don't think socialization is separate from life at all if you're living a rich, full life together. And I just think that whole question came to be probably when we were kids, when people started homeschooling for really strict religious reasons and would want to keep their kids in a vacuum, in a bubble, away from everybody. And so all this stereotyping is kind of old school and doesn't really suit us anymore. We need to break free of that.
I like that answer. I've heard it before. I just wanted to make sure that it was reiterated here in this interview, because it is very important that we understand the idea of raising a child as a community, because it takes the village to raise children. And that is something that is very important. Having every walk of age, every walk of life in your children's lives, so that they get to experience it all as much as possible. I think that's just fantastic.
And every child, like my daughter Tiffany, she just turned 12, but her friends are 15. She's really mature. And so for her to hang out with other younger kids, she doesn't really fit in. It's not a good match for her. And Devin has younger friends. And he even he's 14, and he had a friend, an elderly woman who lived down the street who was 80, who we really had a lot in common with, and he was friends with her. So we're robbing our kids of an incredibly rich social life by sticking them in school. And also, I think the whole socialization question has to do a lot with people thinking that you need to toughen kids up. Like when people ask me that question, I like to dig deeper and say, well, what do you mean? When they say, what about socialization? And sometimes they say, well, shouldn't they deal with bullies? Shouldn't they have to deal with people being mean to them in order to learn how to deal with that in life? And that's such a ridiculous mindset. I think that people were told that themselves, that it was necessary to go through that growing up. And it's really hard for people to face that it wasn't necessary for you to go through all that abuse and torment. People don't want to swallow it because it means that they could have lived a different way. They could have had a better, more peaceful, joyful upbringing. And that's a big pill to swallow for some people.
It really is. It really is, because we're led to believe that everything that we go through has made us stronger. And definitely that is the truth. We are stronger for every triviality we've been through. But the idea of not having to go through that kind of social muck.
Right. It's not, right.
Yeah, it's just not necessary.
Exactly. It's not necessary. Like I know what you're saying. I think back to times where I had, I grew up in the city, in the projects, and we got in fights all the time. I mean, physical fights. I can't even fathom my kids going through what I went through. But I did learn contrast in life. I learned how to be peaceful through living in a way with very violent communication. And so, yeah, you can always spin it and focus on the positives of all your hardships in life. But if you can avoid going through those, why would you put your children through it if it was unnecessary?
Yeah. Now, one thing that I went through a lot of, I can remember sitting at an aunt and uncle's table, and this is going to sound awful, but this is me and Dayna just comparing our lives right now. But I just have so much in common with you. I can remember sitting there and my aunt and uncle saying, well, why don't you have a job now? Your daughter's this age, your son is that age. What do? Sit on the couch eating bonbons, watching Oprah? And I was like, wow, you have no concept of what it is that I do in a day.
Oh, I know. Those kind of comments about stay-at-home moms, or that label, it doesn't even really fit, because we're so much more than that. I mean, if people could have seen what I did even half an hour before this interview, you'd be amazed. It's like superpowers us mothers have. For cleaning, I prepared 3 different meals for people. I mopped the kitchen floor. I cleaned the toilet. And this is all before I took the call from Carrie. So, I mean, we're not sitting on the couch eating bonbons, although there is nothing wrong with that. I would totally embrace getting some bonbons and sitting and watching Oprah with you, Carrie. I think we should do that.
Just to like lay back and laugh a little bit. Why not?
Yeah.
I don't think we should be pigeonholed.
No. I'm totally down for that.
It's true though. We have these misconceptions. Well, we don't, but like the people have these misconceptions and then there's that, you need to have 2 people working in order to make a living, in order to provide for your children, well, it's amazing. If your family is a true family structure, you realize that a lot of things that most families that are keeping up with the Joneses are doing, they're just not faithful to what a family should be anyway. So if you take away all of these extras that are just unnecessary, it's very, very doable to live a happy life with your family that's very full, very rewarding, and very rich.
Oh, completely. And there's so many things I could talk about in relation to that. I mean, for one is whatever money you save your family is money you're making your family. So if you can get a mindset of frugality, that's great when you're staying home. And the other thing is money. My gosh, money is not the only way to get what you want in life. I mean,
so true.
So that's a huge part of it, that traditional people in our culture just think money is everything. Well, I can get a lot without money. You can travel for pennies, buy home exchanges. You can make vision boards with your kids and show them that they can bring so much into their lives without money. You can barter. I mean, Craigslist, there's 101 ways. It's so unnecessary to have to work because there's so many alternatives. But I think it takes shifting your mind and your ideas surrounding money to be able to really see that.
Oh, definitely. There's a lot of attachment issues that come with it.
Yeah.
There's this false security.
Exactly.
Whereas when you're bartering for a lot of your things, I do myself, I make salves all summer long. I bartered the whole summer through between my salves and my jewelry that I make. And it's amazing. And I'm talking bartering, whether it be for money or for time or for a baked good from the neighbor and sharing what we have. It works.
Yeah, for sure. Money's definitely a prison. That's another whole level of not being free when you think that that's the only way to get from point A to point B.
Definitely. It's something that completely constricts you. And I think that it has a power over people where it just freezes them up.
Yep, definitely. As a doula, I've bartered for so much. I mean, for websites, for sheetrock, for our garage we were building, you name it, we've bartered for it. So if you're good at anything, you should really hone that skill and try, whoever's listening, if you have a passion or an interest, see what you can do to turn that into a service for somebody. Do you know something that somebody doesn't? Could you turn it into some kind of coaching or some kind of service of information? And you can barter and get so much. So never feel like you need to have two people working, because there's so many different ways. I'm always happy to brainstorm with people too over the phone to help them discover their hidden potential in that way.
You do quite a lot of that coaching, which I am so impressed with. I say impressed because I know what you have 2 extra kids than I do. So I try to double the children and double the crazy, and you do all of these things. And I mean, I know what I do in a day, and I sit back and I think I sweat with you.
Well, I'll tell you, it's, I think everything looks really impressive to people on Facebook, for example, or how we stay in touch. And you have to realize that everybody does have hard moments or times where they're not so ambitious. I think that you have to ride the waves of inspiration and ambition when you're entrepreneurial person. And there's some weeks where you're so on top of it and your house is clean and dinner's cooked and you're right on top of it. But that's not every single day. I mean, then you have those weeks where the laundry's piling up and you can't get to anything and there's no inspiration and the phone doesn't ring. And so just know that the reality is it does ebb and flow. But I love that contrast in life. I'd be bored if it stayed the same all the time.
I know we need the variation, definitely.
Right.
How did you come about the coaching though? Was it just a natural progression?
Well, I was a La Leche League leader for several years, which is a breastfeeding support trained breastfeeding support professional back 10 years ago. So I got a year's training through that, and then my childbirth teacher training through 2 different organizations. And I really learned a lot about support and helping others. And that really, really, really turned me on. I loved helping other people. Like it felt so good when I'd have meetings. I ran breastfeeding support meetings, and then I had sacred circles with women over, and I would support them in different ventures, and it just has always made me feel really good. And so I just pursued it more and more, and the coaching started, and I just love it. There's nothing that gets me more excited or more passionate in life than helping other people. And so it just happened naturally, I guess. And I think anybody, no matter whatever makes you feel like that, whatever lights you up and gets you excited and gives you butterflies in your stomach, just know that you can pursue it no matter how many kids you have. And I think it's so important always to constantly be learning and expanding and growing and modeling that for your kids, to always be pursuing your passions. That's the heart of unschooling, really.
It's amazing when you cross over from that point of being a people pleaser to being in service. There's
Right.
a huge difference that I don't think we understand. And some will say, well, you said you were a people pleaser and you're doing the same thing. No, it's not the same thing. I actually enjoy being in service to my fellow brothers and sisters. It's not I'm pleasing people in order to get ahead or in order to be accepted. It's just who I am.
And I think the whole people-pleasing thing back in the day when you're conditioned in school was kind of a warped version of it. You just couldn't really be in service back then because you were in service to meeting everybody else's needs. You were in service for obedience. You didn't have time to be in service the way you are now. So it's kind of, people-pleasing was just the pre-part of that. That's all.
Definitely. It was the precursor, definitely.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, when your kids, I don't even know how to broach this. What comes next? Is there a university, or what is the plan? If there's a plan, what is the plan?
Well, people ask me all the time, what are your hopes and dreams for your kids? And I just answer in a way that usually surprises them. And I say that they're happy, that it doesn't matter to me what my kids do as long as they're happy. But that could take many forms. Unschoolers go to college. If you do a search for unschooling in college, you'll find a lot of resources. However, I'm one that believes that college is kind of a big scam. And
just
I think
another avenue, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole movement of uncollege. There's a gentleman that wrote the book Hacking Your Education, and one of his people that works for him came and spoke at a conference that I ran recently. And it's so fascinating with the information that's out there. Now, you can educate yourself about so much. Now, I know if you want to be a doctor or a lawyer that you need to have specialized schooling. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just educating yourself about a trade. I mean, there's so many ways to go about learning. My son Devin right now is really into blacksmithing. So I brainstormed with him. Now, as an unschooling parent, I'm not my child's teacher. It's not a traditional role where I stand in front of him and pour knowledge into him and force him to learn certain things. But my role is to facilitate his learning. So it's a very hands-on role. Unschooling is not for the lazy parent, like some people might think.
No, definitely not.
People think it's uneducating, but it's not. It's just not doing school. So I don't love the label unschooling because some people find it negative, but it works for now, and it is what it is. I like life learning or organic learning or just living, really, is what we're doing. But
free range learning.
Yeah, that's a good one, too, definitely.
Like that.
But we invited over a local blacksmith, a 75-year-old man who mentored Devin, and Devin apprenticed with him, and he learned about the trade. And he's seen YouTube videos, and we've bought books, and you can subscribe to magazines. So we nurture his passions and interests and look at them as the nucleus of his learning. And although we don't break life down into subjects like people do in school, math, English, science, if you were to break his life down into subjects, you would see that with the resources we brought into his life based on this one interest, it does touch on everything. And so our kids have a very broad knowledge base, but it's perfectly catered to who they are as an individual. They're not cookie cutter kids that have learned from a curriculum, because I know that not everyone's meant to learn the same thing in life. And I can't even believe that our culture thinks that that's okay and thinks that that's normal.
It's been going on for so long that they just don't know any different, and they don't see a problem with it. They see a problem with anything that veers off from the norm. It's scary.
Right. But it's so important. It is scary, but it's so important to have that broader perspective that everything new starts off like this. That when I have grandchildren and great-grandchildren, this is going to be just a choice. It's not going to be weird anymore. I don't know what label it'll have then, but this is on the leading edge of thought and parenting and education. We just happen to be pioneers, that's all. But we're doing all the work now so our kids don't have to.
Well, and it's exploding right now. If I'm not, I don't want to name a number, but if I'm not mistaken, it was way up in the number, like hundreds of thousands of families in the United States are homeschooling now. I know in Canada, there's a lot of people that are homeschooling, and it's not just your typical what it used to be, whereas you were mentioning the religious, it's everybody.
Yeah, homeschooling, definitely. There's a lot of people doing it. It's much more acceptable. Unschooling is a whole different ball game, I think, for people because it touches on parenting as well. I don't know if you want to get into that in the conversation.
I would love to. I would love to. By all means, get into that conversation. Let's talk about how it is not just about the children's learning, but how you parent as well.
Well, I mean, there's so many labels, but I want to help people understand that homeschooling is doing a curriculum generally, or doing what schools do, but doing it at home, where unschooling is not using a curriculum. It's not doing school at all, hence the term unschooling. You're living life and pursuing your interests, but you learn from the internet, mentorships, from so many different resources. So unschooling is a lot less restrictive. And then there's radical unschooling, which is the title of my book. It's sometimes called whole life unschooling. And what it means is to extend unschooling philosophy, where education focuses on trusting children, extending it in other areas of your life. So, for example, my kids have never been punished. My kids have never had a bedtime. They've never had any limits or restrictions on media or foods in any way. They've had true freedom. So this is really what blows people's minds. And generally when we've done TV interviews and stuff, it's what people most want to talk about. So I think people really get unschooling with the educational aspect, especially where we live in the technological age and in the internet and resources. But the parenting thing now, it's fascinating for people to understand freedom in this level. So I'm happy to answer any questions that come to your mind about it.
Okay. Well, when you talk about the parenting, parents have to realize that it's not that higher authoritarian, be afraid of me and do as I say, or else there'll be a punishment. How do you suggest that parents break that mind frame? Because as much as, I mean, I know even I have had difficulties with this. I was raised very authoritarian style, very, and I still carried some of those things over. And I thought, well, what's wrong with the bedtime, or what's wrong with these things? So how would you go about answering that for somebody?
Well, let me first explain that most of us were raised in the authoritarian paradigm, and that is, 99% of parenting books on the market are focused on obedience and behavioral training and behavioral modification. Like if you see a show like the Nanny 911 shows, it really is all focused on obedience and behavioral modification and training. Kids are punished and rewarded for acting in ways that please the parents. And it's a very narcissistic approach because it's focused on meeting the parents' needs solely. The parents' needs for quiet, obedience, uninterrupted sleep. And that is our cultural mindset, which is very narcissistic. And so this is just kind of evolutionary because it wasn't very long ago where men were told to beat their wives when dinner wasn't on the table on time. Men were told to punish their women by their fathers, by their friends,
Exactly.
and obedience was the focus with marriage and with any kind of partnership with a man and woman. Now look at how far we've come from that. So what is happening and what everyone's in the midst of in our culture right now is that this is happening with children now, that we are seeing that it's so much more important to focus on a partnership dynamic. So what radical unschooling is a partnership paradigm, which is very different than the authoritarian paradigm. And people are so resistant to it for some of the reasons we've already talked about. For example, it really triggers them in realizing that they didn't need to go through what they went through as a child, even though they were told it was necessary. So a lot of healing happens with the parent when you're able to kind of reparent yourself through parenting your child differently. But so instead of focusing on behavior, I take it and I help parents take it one step deeper, so much deeper than just behavior, because children act in certain ways based on if they're tired or hungry, and most of their actions and behaviors are completely age appropriate. So, but we expect children to act like adults, and they can't. It's impossible. So we train children and punish them for not acting like adults. We punish them for being children, basically. So focusing on the needs under the behavior is what will change everything. I could say that one line and end this interview now, and if you really took it to heart, it would change your relationship with your child drastically. So partnership dynamic, completely different than the authoritarian paradigm, and that's what I'm all about.
Now, people are going to say, okay, that's fine, but what if your child does something that would be deemed unruly, which I think is funny? Like, okay, so your kid paints all over the wall. I don't find that unruly. I find that creative expression. Am I going to paint over it? It's their room. If they like it, why not just leave it like that? And some people would be horrified about that.
Well, I mean, there's so much that could be asked about that dynamic, like where was the parent when the child was in painting their room? So much of it is parent not taking responsibility, and rules and punishments are a replacement for being there. They're a replacement for being present. So I would first say that if a child is too young to understand that it's not okay to paint their room, or that you have an issue with painting their room, then it was irresponsible for you to leave paint and a paintbrush in your child's room where they just weren't capable of not understanding that yet.
I completely agree. It's like they took away those baby walkers, which not that we need them, but the idea that, do you remember those on wheels and you would put them in the little walker? And well, you can't have them anymore because, well, they're falling down the stairs. And the only thing I can think of is, well, how the heck did that happen? Exactly. Where was the parent?
Right. And so like rules are a replacement for being there. People hate when I say that. Oh my God, that really triggers people because it even gives me goosebumps to say, because there's so much responsibility that parents don't take, and they blame their children for so much. How many times, Carrie, do you remember being punished or blamed for something that wasn't your fault, and you knew it? You felt the injustice to your core, and it hurt you, and it makes kids stutter and bite their nails. And there's so much warping that happens because parents aren't taking responsibility, but they don't know any better. Their parents didn't, and their culture is telling them to only focus on behavior and to punish them, like train them like dogs. You give them a reward or a cookie when they do what pleases you, and when they do what doesn't please you, you hurt them and you put them in timeout. And these are human beings we're talking about here. So when parents shift and they really see through these different lenses, everything changes. I mean, peaceful parenting changes people's lives because it's so much easier, for one, because it's joyful. And then parenting is supposed to feel good. It's not supposed to be a painful, awful, negative experience. If it did, we'd have died off, millions of years ago.
Yeah.
So
No, it's something that's radical. It's changing your entire thought process, your feelings, understanding what it was to be a child. I've made plenty of mistakes coming to these understandings because I'm not making excuses for myself, but that's what I knew. And it took research and really listening to my heart and saying, well, wait a minute, this isn't right. It wasn't right when I was a kid. It's not right now. It's like I had to grow up all over again. You're rebuilding who you are as a person in order to be the best parent that you can for your child.
totally. And these aren't mistakes either. I mean, it's like one thing I wrote about in my book is that it's coming to this life is like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We all have days where we are tired or hungry and might revert to the way we were parented, or you can't be the ideal perfect parent 24/7, but how you handle it after the fact, you do something you're not happy about, is what matters. So this morning, I'll give you a good example, just so you guys know that I'm not some perfectly peaceful parent all the time. My daughter Ivy was wanting to go out. We were going somewhere, and I had just woken up, and she really, really, really wanted to go out. And she kept saying, I want to go now. I want to go right now. I don't want to wait. And she's 8, and I got frustrated and I snapped at her and said, I'm not ready yet. I didn't handle it in a way that I was proud of. I was a little snappy and, then just like kind of grounding myself and apologizing to her and giving her a hug. And I said, you didn't need to be treated that way. I'm sorry. Could you please wait? I know you're anxious to go. And then I brought myself to a place of really talking about it, but I had just woken up, hadn't had my coffee yet. I extended forgiveness to myself for not being perfect, and I apologized to her and told her she didn't deserve to be treated that way, and let's have a do-over. So if you think you need to be perfect all the time, you don't. You can totally have do-overs and apologize. I mean, our culture tells us not to apologize to our children because they'll take advantage of us, and it'll show weakness. But that's only in the authoritarian paradigm. I mean, and that's so wrong. It's not true. Your children learn kindness and love and peace and forgiveness and how to say they're sorry by watching you. It's all about modeling. So children learn what they live, and this type of partnership paradigm brings that to a level that most people have never seen before.
No, definitely. Now, to backpedal just a little bit, you had said that Devin was really into blacksmithing. I'd like the listeners to really understand what lengths he's gone to in this. I know what he's done. I saw it on YouTube. I was thrilled. My husband and I sat back and went, wow. Oh, wow. I hope one of my kids I hope one of them want to do something this cool, And then John's like, well, even if I don't have I'm going to do it. What is it that Devin is going and doing because he just loves this?
Well, it's fascinating because this touches on so many things we've talked about, money being one of them. Devin really wanted a forge, and I've learned so much as a side effect of my kids' passions. I had no clue about blacksmithing before any of this, but a forge is is kind of the fire. It's where you put the coal and how you actually melt the metal down enough to form it and shape it. And he wanted a forge for a really long time, and they're pretty expensive. I mean, $200-300, and I normally wouldn't have any problem buying that for him if we had the money. But it's been, before Christmas season, we sell toys for a living. It's been a little slow this summer, so we were helping him save, and he was saving $300 for a forge that he wanted, and then he said, there's got to be a way I can make one of these and not need to spend money. He's definitely a frugal kid. He's very simple, and he loves to not have to use money if he doesn't have to. Well, he found an awesome plan on YouTube and a video on how to make a forge. Now, this is hard. This is pretty hardcore. I mean, this isn't just Legos like he used to do when he was 3 and 4 years old. This is like, wow. Like, we had to drive all over the place looking for all these parts from plumbing stores, and he found an old brake drum from the dump, and then he found an old school desk, a really old metal school desk, which I love that he's using that, actually, because it's like a much better use for a school desk.
I love it.
It's just really kind of ironic and cool that he's using it for that. And he just figured out he basically made a forge, which it's amazing. It brings me to tears, and it heats up to 3,000 degrees. And it only cost him, I think ended up being like $40 to $50 for this amazing thing that you normally pay hundreds for. So for one, it was the whole idea of you don't need money to get what you want. You need to know how to make things yourself, how to create things. And for two, he researched it himself. He knew how to find the answers. He knows how to learn. And that is the basis of unschooling on another level too, is I don't want my kids just to learn how to memorize things like I did, just to pass a test and to please others. I want my kids to know that learning never ends. Life is about learning, expansion and growth. We're supposed to learn until we die.
Exactly. Exactly. And I mean, this is something that is just absolutely, you look at any other, he's 16?
He's 14.
14. Okay, there you go. He's 14 years old, and he's done something that no child his age in school has ever even contemplated doing.
Exactly. And that's why I love this life, because he is truly able to be who he's meant to be in life. There's nothing more organic or natural than this. The individual, this perfectly individualized education, he has time to find out who he is and what he wants to do. And the life skills that he has gained is mind-blowing to me. I mean, blacksmithing is just one of dozens of skills that he's learned that I would never have had time to do, because I was too busy living somebody else's agenda, jumping through these hoops, pleasing everybody else, and then all these extracurricular activities where our kids have time and they have freedom to find out what they want to do with their lives. So there is not even a seed of a doubt that this life isn't incredible. And I want other people to know that you can have it if you really want it.
It's not impossible. It's not taboo. It's not damaging in any way. If anything, it is completely fulfilling somebody to be able, a soul to be able to follow their bliss and find out who they are. Thinking about it, you go through school, you get through high school, and they send you off to college or university so that you can be what you're going to be for the rest of your life. What 18-year-old child in that situation knows what they want to do for the rest of their life? That's ridiculous.
I don't even know what I want to do, Carrie, for the rest of my life.
I know.
I'm always learning and growing and changing. We're not meant to do one career. We're not meant to just be stagnant and do the same thing. People need to wake up and realize that this isn't just about parenting. This isn't just about kids. This is about a whole life philosophy of what do you want to be next year? You can be that. You can become that. You can learn how to create things and do things and grow and expand. And it's amazingly empowering for me to watch my children walk through this life, because they inspire me to do the same.
Well, I see you, and I see what you're doing, and I see that, okay, you're an author and you're a speaker and you're coaching parents, and you've just taken on modeling. And let me tell you, you are absolutely breathtaking in your pictures, and I love the strength behind it. What brought you to do that now?
Well, my husband is a photographer, and he's always wanted to take my photos, and I've just always been really insecure and shy about it until the last couple of years, and I've really just grown in confidence. And I finally said, hey, I just turned 40. I'm at my peak. Even though women like to think 40 is not, they're getting old. We are young women at this age, and we are going for it. And I just felt like it was something I've always wanted to do. And again, always learning and growing and exploring new passions. And it's been wonderful. So I'm really grateful for going for it.
Yeah, it's wonderful that you say that, because I'm nearing 40. I'm 38, and I've never felt more alive. I've never felt more youthful. I've never felt more robust and ready to conquer whatever's put in front of me. And we do have this perception that at 40 you're somehow washed out, or you need to become a cougar, which is just like...
That was last week with Devin. Like, how funny. My 14-year-old and I were looking up. I'm like, what's a cougar? He goes, Matt, come here. Let me tell you.
It's funny, though, because we have all these opportunities and we're limiting ourselves. We're limiting ourselves to these social constructs that were never meant to be imposed on us in the first place. So what you're saying with, you can change what you want to be and what you want to do as much as you possibly want. I've been saying, I'm doing now what I've always wanted to do. What I'm doing here with you is something that brings me great joy. I want to, at one point, become a midwife. I want to be bringing children into this world and supporting other women to do that. I think that as I get older, that just seems like the next logical step with me. So when you said you were a doula, because I didn't know that, I was like, wow, we are so in sync with our lives. It's very, very, very bizarre, but I appreciate it because it's nice to see somebody else with the same type of goals and beautiful way of looking at life.
Well, I mean, I think we're so disempowered in our culture as women growing up, and it all starts with birth, pregnancy and birth. When you can be with a woman and empower her and encourage her that she can bring that baby into this world by herself under her own power, she doesn't need anyone to rescue her. And when you actually go through that, it's the start of everything. If I hadn't gone through that, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. If I would have said, gone a different route and let somebody rescue me, and I would have hired a doctor and been feared into listening and obeying. I didn't obey anyone. I did my own thing, and that started everything for me. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's so important for your children to see that life is about learning, because most kids in our culture, their parents are, in the same job, and once they get out of school at 18, they stop learning because they were forced to learn, and they associate learning with not being free. So I love to always be learning and growing. I'm also a raw food chef and have my own business where I teach other people how to make raw food, and that's something really new. So I think what you said, you hit that certain age where you have freedom to do a lot more as your kids get older. So if you're somebody listening that has really younger kids, don't worry about all of this now, because right now they physically really, really need you. But there will come a time when your kids get a little older and you do have more physical time where you can pursue different things.
And it's really so important for us to stop feeling guilty about being parents, because society has this thing where, I was saying, we don't have enough time for this and that and the other. But the reason why you had children was to build a family. It wasn't because ABC, NBC, and CBS told you to.
Right. Right. And when you're living a life like this, I mean, you are modeling a mini microcosm of world peace. It's pretty hardcore important. This is like making history here when you're choosing a parent like this. So don't think of yourself as only a parent either. I mean, you're modeling something that's the basis of peace for the world. So it's very special and very important. And I love being a mom. I really do.
It's something that has it helped me to grow. I have become a better person through raising my children. I've discovered who I am in raising them more and more and more, and I'm always learning more about myself, more about them, more about what I can accomplish, more about what they can accomplish, and not even accomplish, just who they are at their soul level, who I am at my soul level. My husband, it's something that when I look at, the soccer mom running because she's doing this, she has her full-time job, and then she's running to hockey and soccer and ballet and gymnastics, and I see these women, they're in pain, and their relationships suffer because of it. Let's talk about the dynamic between you and your husband. Traditional roles are out the window.
Yep.
Right? We're more of a team effort, not a mom and dad have specific roles. Of course, there are those gender differences, but I mean, this is a team effort. Talk about how you and your husband have approached this.
Well, Joe and I have been together since I was 15 and he was 17. That's when we met in high school, and we were total rebels. I mean, I'd skip school and we'd go smoke cigarettes and party, and we were real metalheads, going to concerts and mosh pits, and we were kind of on the fringe back then, and we just kind of grew into this. Isn't it funny too, because we're still rebels. We're rebels against our culture, listening to our hearts, and that's what connected us to begin with. And he's always been a really connected, attached father. I mean, he wore all of our kids in slings and was so supportive of co-sleeping. He is ultra supportive, which I know is kind of a rarity with most of the people I work with anyway. They try to find out how to get their husbands on board more than not. So I'm really grateful for what an amazing father Joe is. But I'm sure people are wondering, when you co-sleep, for example, how you have time to be intimate, and how do you have time to be together when there's kids around all the time? Well, times just naturally unfold. And when you don't live by a schedule and you're free, whenever you have those moments is when you meet each other's needs, physically, emotionally, and have plenty of time together. So that was like a really long answer. I don't even know if I answered
No,
your question
you
at this
did.
point.
You did. It's all possible. There is no barrier. You guys are working it out together. I'll share a bit of a candid story. When we were co-sleeping with Aiden, Aiden would 9 times out of 10 fall asleep on the breast. And if he woke up and I didn't wake up, John would just gently place the breast back into his mouth like it was nothing. And it was
No.
never, and he'd say, and he'd joke about it the next day. And he loved that he could just do that because it wasn't taking anything away from him. He didn't have to disturb me. He felt wonderful doing it. These little moments, I don't know how many men can say that. It's a special, beautiful ability for a man to be able to drop all that societal garbage and be who he's meant to be.
Yeah, fathers are very, very nurturing, and I think sometimes it's more challenging for them to embrace that side of themselves if they were raised with that mentality of being, quote unquote, tough guys that don't show emotion. I know that's a struggle. I know when we first came to really understanding about partnership parenting, I remember Devin was about 2, and Joe asked him to do something, and he didn't, quote unquote, obey. Devin was doing something else, and Joe kind of had a little emotional breakdown and said to me, "When is it my turn?" And I said, "What do you mean? Like, what are you talking about? What's the matter?" And he was really upset, and he said, I was raised my whole life being forced to obey everybody around me, everyone. And I thought when I became a parent, it'd finally be my turn. And now you're telling me that we're not doing it that way." And I said, well, but he said, "I totally get it. I so understand. And I don't want to do that to him either, but it's so hard. It's like, why didn't my parents do this? Why was I so beaten down? And not just parents. I don't mean to blame his parents because they were wonderful, nurturing human beings. It was just a different time back then, and you do what you knew how to do. And when you knew better, you did better. But when the authoritarian paradigm is just damaging, it's very damaging to people. And so he was just kind of like had that little moment where he was like, okay, so we're not doing it that way. We're not forcing obedience. That's not how this is going. We're going to actually focus on this person's needs. And I'm just kind of pissed that I didn't have that opportunity either. So I think dads do go through a mourning period in a sense when you say, this is a little different.
I think even I went through some of that though.
Yeah.
I have those moments where I'm like, wait a minute. And you get that, I wish I had this. I have those moments where I'm, making breakfast and the kids are running around doing crafts or whatever it is that they're doing. And I'm just like, it would have been so awesome to have this growing up. And then I'm just grateful that I had the sense to do it and the partnership to have the support to be able to do it.
Completely. And there may be times when you're walking this path and you see a mother in the store or see a mother and child together and she says something and the kids are like little robots and extremely obedient. You're like, wow, that seems really easy. But these children are feared out of being hurt to obey. And so I never want that for my kids. And I was the same way. You're petrified of getting punished. So you did what you were told and you were not asked a second time, so it was so different. Even saying those words puts fear in my stomach because I remember the way that we were raised from just any adult. And so, in the long run, the amazing connected relationship I have with my kids is incredible. And children learn what they live, and kindness begets kindness and respect begets respect. You never have to force a child to respect you because that's not true respect anyway. You never have to punish a child. You have to treat them respectfully, and that's how they learn to be respectful. And my kids, like I said, have never been punished yet. They're amazing human beings with such capacity for love and kindness. And I know it's because of this parenting.
Well, they're whole children. They're allowed to be whole beings.
Exactly.
Nothing's beaten out of them. Nothing's taken away from them or scared out of them.
They're not afraid to tell people how they feel, which is a really big difference. They tell people how they feel, but in a kind, respectful way. They're not holding on to so much baggage. Our kids are not going to have to go through 10 years of healing after their adulthood through therapy or self-help books or whatever, all the stuff that most of us had to go through.
Exactly.
From being raised in the authoritarian paradigm, we are investing in our kids by parenting this way. So yes, rules and punishment are easy. It just takes a second. And But I don't have that in me. I cannot be cruel to another human being. It's not part of my DNA. It's not part of my makeup. And when I was told to spank Devin when he was a year old, I couldn't even fathom hurting my child. And so there's so much to it. There's so much to talk about, Carrie, in this one interview.
I know. Let's go off the topic just a little bit. I won't keep you for much longer. But when you look at the world today and the chaos that it is, what are your thoughts on our circumstances as humanity? It's a big question.
Well, maybe I have a Pollyanna kind of mindset, but I see all the thriving in the world, and I get so excited in my heart that so many people are understanding this perspective, that times are changing and things are shifting really quickly towards more peace and joy. So I'm extremely hopeful, and I really get excited, to be honest with you, when I think about the future.
That's awesome, because you see that you can see all the little changes are making big differences.
Hugely so. My goodness, hugely so. And kindness, I think it's so important to get away from control. Like, that's a big part of it. You know, we shift from control to connection with our kids, but not only with our kids, but with everybody in our lives. So coming to peaceful partnership parenting is one step towards peace, but extending that same philosophy of focusing on other people's needs, whether it's your mother-in-law or your mother or family or friends, and really extending loving kindness to them too, and other parents who are parenting differently, extending loving kindness instead of judgment. I can remember when I was a new parent, if I saw a child with formula, because I was a breastfeeding mom, I would be so judgmental, and I was just like, oh, that poor baby, my goodness, you know, but that was part of my process, that was part of my journey, and I came to the point where people are only doing what they're doing, and I actually ended up having a child needing formula. My second child was the only one that had formula. Because of our nursing strike. And so as you grow on this path, you become less judgmental and you open your heart to love and understanding. So if I see a parent in a store or somewhere out in public that's treating a child harshly, instead of feeling anger in my heart for them and thinking, oh my gosh, that child's so abused, I go over and ask if I can help. And I smile at the parent and try to extend love and kindness to them and non-judgment, because more than likely they have no idea of their options. They don't know that there's a better way, a more kinder, more peaceful way. So the best way that you can help other people come to this life is to truly be that love and kindness and peace to everybody, and just offer help in a loving hand when you can, instead of judgment and criticism.
It's to drop the whole bully facade. The whole entire bully facade has to go away completely, because you sitting here doing one thing different doesn't make you better than another person. It's just the idea that they haven't seen any other way. They don't know of any other way, and judging them isn't going to make it any different. It's just going to add more hate to the whole situation.
Into the world, exactly. So my kids now, they've seen me do this so much in public that if they see a parent struggling with a child, they go over and offer help and kindness and love and not judgment. So again, children learn what they live. And
now, I have to ask, what is the reaction from parents when they're so, frustrated, and you have this, happy family coming over and saying, can I help you?
People love it. I've never really received any negative at all. People are just so grateful. Some people just say, oh, no, thank you. And some people, and it's not even, it's just with the intention to bring a little bit of joy. And it's kind of like what a doula does. When I go to a birth, I like to think of it as I kind of hold the vibration high. I try to keep the joyful energy present regardless of what's going on in the labor. I hold the space, and I try to hold the space for people in public. So I'll go over and just, ask, is there anything I can do to help you? You look so busy. I totally feel your pain. I know I have 4 kids, and I just be non-judgmental and kind and just say, let me give you a hand for a sec. And mothers are so grateful, because women have a hard time approaching each other. Women, especially those of us that were really bullied in school, and women, even grown women, can be bullies. And I've experienced that myself.
Oh, definitely.
A lot. So it's scary for a woman to be approached by another woman, but most women are really grateful when you can offer help.
Something that I was talking about in episode 2 with Thomas Sheridan was the idea that we have been conditioned to see that there's nothing past the maiden part of your life. That through Disney, nothing comes after the maiden. there's no emphasis put on mother, and there's no emphasis put on crone. The crone is thrown into an old aged institution, and the mother's not allowed to be the true mother that she is supposed to thrive in. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I never really thought about it before. You're right, though. I think it's fascinating. I think we should start a production company and pick up where Disney hasn't covered.
Oh, I like that idea. It would be amazing, though, to show, a cycle of a woman's life from the beauty and virility and the excitement of being a maiden and transitioning into motherhood is one of the most beautiful things that there is to witness and to live through. But then, I mean, as I'm coming, on 40, not that I'm going crone yet, but I have the odd gray hair, and I don't look at it like, oh no, I have to go color that now. I look at it and I'm happy for it. I embrace myself as I'm aging. Would you say that you're taking it the same way?
I totally embrace it too. Like I don't mind aging. I really, but it is a struggle sometimes. It's self-talk from my childhood. Like I hear my teen critical self creep up sometimes, and then I have to just talk to her and just talk her off the cliff and be like, this is perfect, all is well. And so I think it is a journey that self-love, that birth really helped me with that. Yeah, I mean, you've really got me thinking. My brain won't stop now about different options. There was a great woman who used to write a comic, and she's a friend of mine. Her name is Heather Cushman Dowdy, and she wrote a comic, a decade ago called Hathor the Cow Goddess. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but she did cartoons about that stage of early motherhood. And I loved it so much because it kind of did pick up where Disney left off, and it was all about nursing and co-sleeping and public scrutiny and how to deal with it lovingly. I think one of the best things that you can do is to just model that you love motherhood for your children if you do. My daughters are growing, even though Disney hasn't written the movies, my daughters are living the experience through me. I love to talk to young girls, and I love to talk to teens about the power of birth and the power of motherhood and get them very excited for that next chapter in their life. Young girls are very drawn to talk to me about things like that. So I don't know where that's going to go, but some great children's books or books for teens or tweens about that would be really awesome, don't you think?
Yeah, I really do. And I think that there's a lack of it. So I think you should get right on that.
Yeah. Yeah, with all my spare time, I'll just get on that. But if I want to do something bad enough, I always do it. So
of course, that's something that I've come to is that every dream I've ever had, I've been able to make it come true because I never stopped believing in it. And that's something so powerful that we instill in the children, that we keep alive in ourselves, that nothing's impossible as long as you're working towards it. I mean, you can't just say, oh, I want to do this and expect it to happen. Of course, you have to work towards it, but in that positive, joyful, blissful way of just continuing to go with the current.
Exactly. Yeah. There's so much more potential for so much more advocacy. There's so much potential. Every time I meet with a different person or friend or soul like yourself, I get electric and inspired connecting with certain people, and you're one of them. Now that I've talked to you, I could just see us talking for hours and hours every day. We'd have so many projects going. It would be ridiculous.
I can agree. The wheels have been turning as we're going, oh, we could do this. This sounds good.
I'm like, okay, she's going to be a midwife. Okay, then I could study midwifery. Then we can start this whole program. Supporting my mind just works like that, and certain inspired souls of what's next. So
well, it's something that I've discussed many times. We're all conduits to each other, right? So we're all flowing energy towards each other, and we don't shut it off. We just let it flow.
Yeah.
And so it grows. We have no choice but to just, well, I mean, I guess we could stop it, but we're not like that, right? We want this energy to grow. We want to see these beautiful creations come to fruition because we believe in ourselves.
Completely. And all you have to do is set the intention. You shoot off that rocket of desire, as Esther Hicks says. I don't know if you're a fan of Abraham Hicks, but
definitely.
I really love their work, her work, their work, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Years and years ago, it's just really inspiring. The whole law of attraction piece for me and what I do in life. I came to it about 7 years ago and haven't looked back. And so I know that if we just set the intention for doing something great, that you don't have to think about it again. I think people get so stuck in the how of like how things are going to come to be that it really ruins the whole creation, because the exciting part is setting the intention and then just saying, ooh, it'll be so exciting to just see how it all unfolds, because it's always a way you never dreamed. It's always a way you didn't think of. It just happens. And life can be a lot easier than people think when you let go of the how.
Definitely nothing needs to be micromanaged.
No, because the micromanagement is what makes things not happen.
Exactly.
It makes it difficult.
Everything gets lost in the details.
Exactly.
I have to agree. Now, what's coming up for you? What are some of the maybe seminars that you're doing or workshops that you're holding? Let the people know where they can find what's going on in the near future with Dayna Martin.
Well, you can go to my website to see what I'm up to, daynamartin.com, DaynaMartin.com. I also have a family blog where I write about our family adventures, and that's the sparklingmartins .blogspot.com, or is it at blogspot.com?
It's .blogspot.com.
Okay. Yeah, and then friend me on Facebook or subscribe to my page. If my friends list is full now, but you can subscribe and all my posts are public. So I'd love to just share what I do day to day. But what's coming next, as far as unschooling, is I run a yearly conference. And this April 7th through the 11th, here in my town, North Conway, New Hampshire, at the Red Jacket, we have a conference called the Life Rocks Unschooling Conference. And it's huge and it's amazing. And we're still looking and open for anybody that wants to participate, whether it's offering sessions or speaking, or we're early in our planning stages. But that is my favorite event. That's what I'm doing with unschooling. I'm in the process of creating an iTunes series, so I'll have my own iTunes show very shortly, and it's going to be called Try This at Home with Dayna Martin.
Beautiful. Good for you. I love to see that you're constantly coming up with new works.
Yeah, it's really fun. I really love it. So, and also, I mean, I'm always happy to help anybody. If you can't afford a coaching session, don't let it stop you from contacting me, because when I have time, I'd love to help you and answer your questions and just point you in the direction for answers. Because if you think you can't do this, or you think that somehow we're unique or special, I mean, I know we are, Carrie, in our own way. However, anyone can live this life with the right kind of support. So let us be a resource for you, for either Carrie or I to be resources and support system for you. And if you feel drawn to either of us with anything we've shared, don't hesitate sending that email, because women need to reach out, and men. Women and men need to reach out to one another and connect and form these networks. So, yeah, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, so would I. I'm fully in support of that. We need to create more hubs of space for us to get together and feel comfortable talking to each other.
Completely. And never feel like you can't reach out and contact somebody like us just because we're being interviewed, or you think that we're like too whatever to answer, because we're just moms. We're just moms that happen to have an hour free tonight. Surprisingly, I can't believe we have any of our kids in the background.
No, it's actually quite amazing. I think maybe the dogs might have gone off. I'm not sure.
At one point, but
yeah. But the children have all been very, very, very kind to us right now. I'm really grateful that you came on the show. Thank you so much for taking the time out for myself and the listeners tonight. You are an absolute inspiration. I've learned so much from you. I've been able to change my perspective through your example. So I need to thank you for that personally, because I mean it's been a long road, and it's completely worth the challenge that it's been. And I have absolutely no regrets, but I do definitely have to give thanks where thanks is due. And you have been a huge inspiration. I am so grateful for the day that I had this little argument on Facebook over the unschooling. No, my children have to be scheduled. It was a turning point for me. So thank you for that.
Oh, thanks for saying that. It's so great to connect with you. It was an honor to be part of your film, and I look forward to see what we'll create together in the future.
Definitely. To all the listeners that have been listening, thank you so much for tuning in to this show. Again, you can see Dayna on Facebook. You can also reach her through www.daynamartin.com. That's DaynaMartin.com. Also at the sparklingmartins.blogspot.com. And if you're interested in any of the toys that Dayna and her husband make. They have a website at willowtoys.com, and there's some fantastic playthings for the kids that'll last a lifetime. I really encourage everybody to take a look at what they've got going on there. Again, Dayna, thank you so much for your time. It was an absolute pleasure. To the listeners, we'll see you again soon. Peace.